Welcome to Parenti Stuff, the podcast. I am your host, Lumpy Louise, and this is the read and discuss of Democracy for the Few, 9th edition. Chapter 13, Mass Media for the Men. It is Parenti time. Okay. So, what do I got going today? I wanted to start with just a little story about what's going on. This has nothing to do with mass media, but that's what Chapter 13 is about. But some other stuff that we've talked about. And one of the things that we touched in the series was like corporate benevolent, like being a benevolent corporation and, you know, doing all this stuff. That was, you know, a bunch of chapters ago that we were talking about it. And so there's a story going on in New England right now that you may or may not hear something about it, but it's this chain store or chain grocery store. The family is Demoulas. It was Arthur Sr., you know, big long Greek name that I can't remember, but he went by Arthur Demoulas, and he ran Market Basket, and he had a few sons. There's a lot of things, but there's like two sons that like kind of took over the store. His other son didn't really get into the store, but they had some children that end up, so some of the cousins and stuff get involved. So as the children of those, you know, so it's the grandfather and then it's the grandkids now. And there are two Arthurs. There's an Arthur S and an Arthur T. And Arthur T takes a lot after his grandfather, who his employees really loved him. Market Basket is one of the better places to work for, you know, in the offices. I worked with some of these people because I worked in the sales of grocery foods and stuff like that. So, you know, I actually have talked to people that work there, and even in the stores they have a decent wage for working in a grocery store. They do all this. And even the grocery stores themselves, the consumers, the customers really love them because they always tended, even though they were a small chain, or, you know, now they're like 90 stores, but, you know, back when I was, there was probably only about 50 stores or something like that. But even when they were a small chain, they always like would find the deals. Like they would always take the stuff off the hands. You know, the client I had was Unilever, so that's a huge client. And we could sell them truckloads of Skippy peanut butter that, you know, someone, you know, ordered but then didn't want or something like that. And we could get them off our hands, you know, and just give them to them. So the consumers love them. The workers loved Arthur Sr. and RDT takes after him. He is the CEO. And the his cousins are all on the board, and they don't like that he stands up for in 2014, he you know, helped his employees go on a strike for better wages and stuff like that. And now, you know, 11 years later, they're still trying to oust him now. They're making up some other bull crap, but it's all about, you know, them not making enough money. And that's why they're trying to get rid of him. So I just wanted to bring up that story because it's happening in real time in New England right now, that they're trying to oust the CEO for being a benevolent CEO, because this stuff doesn't work in capitalism. It just doesn't. It's always going to land to, you know, the more greedy people when you have shareholders and stuff like that. So just wanted to bring that up. Okay. So we're on chapter 13, and this is Mass Media for the Many by the Few. And before Manufacturing Consent by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky, there was Parenti's Inventing Reality. So as we head into this next chapter, I'm going to tell you to read this Inventing Reality. You can read Inventing Reality and not even read Manufacturing Consent, because that, you know, so because that is, it basically gives you all the information you need on that. And it was written before Manufacturing Consent, and Manufacturing Consent, some people have said that they kind of stole a little bit from Inventing Reality, you know, whatever, but it's more condensed. It's a smaller read. It's easier to understand, and it's Parenti. So read Parenti. Okay. And then he also has another book that you should read. On the other side of it is The Entertainment of Mass Media. And that is called Make Believe Media. So you can read that one too. And you know, he gets into it, and we talk about how this inventing reality came about, this manufacturing consent had come about with the weapons of mass destruction. Like that's our big one that we can look at, but that was, you know, what he's talking about, because this book was written in 2010. So you're able to look at, you know, more recent things, and we can just, you know, we can look at what's going on, you know, in the media with, you know, what's going on in Israel and how they're trying to, you know, get us to, you know, believe that they're, you know, nothing's bad really going on or something like that. And as of this weekend, I don't know if it was yesterday or during the weekend, the Spocks, the spokesman for Biden administration, Matthew Miller, has just come out and said, look, I knew that they were doing war crimes. Like, he says this, he goes, but that's not what I was supposed to say. Like, I had to tell you this. So that, like, not that that's media, but he's the one that talks to the media. He had to put that information out. The White House didn't want you to believe that there were war crimes. And, you know, he believed in his head, as the words are coming out of his mouth, that, you know, we don't believe as a country there is any. So, I mean, that you can use that as you may. You can read into that. Okay, so I had this book sitting in my read list for a while, and I figured I'd start digging in now, since the new version of Animal Farm is coming to a theater near you at the end of this week. And a bunch of ops keep bringing up the damn children's book in defense of anti-communism. It's called Orwell Subverted, the CIA and the Filming of Animal Farm. And though the author, Daniel J. Lieb, gives Orwell a bit more credit than I think he deserves, he does explain that Orwell did maintain that the book was not just about the Bolsheviks and Stalin, but an allegory about any totalitarianism, which includes his own country, England, which was then and still is a capitalist country. Though, as a side note, Orwell did maintain he hated Stalin and he felt Stalin was a totalitarian. So it was also about that, but neither here nor there. And how it was first, it was actually the British spies, or, well, it was this spy turned historian, the fifth Baron of Tarrington, Montague Woodhouse, and then the U.S. newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. Remember, this is back in 1947-ish when they're talking about doing this. Came out in the early 50s, I think 52 or something like that. So the newly formed CIA that pushed for making the book into an animated film, because they felt it was a simple enough message for anti-communism for everyone, including children, to understand, even though Orwell himself was a democratic socialist and an anti-capitalist. All right, Frank Wisner, he's right up there with Allen Dulles, you know, in the CIA. So he was one of the founders of the CIA and got involved in making Animal Farm into a film. He was a spy in the OSS during World War II, and like many spies, had a hard time adjusting to normal life after. Wisner was involved in gathering the names of the anti-communists in the Soviet region who helped Germany in 1944 during the war. A list they used not to go after Axis collaborators, but to attack the Soviets soon after the war concluded. Among the list was many fascist groups, including the OUN of Ukraine. I had mentioned in a previous chapter how the CIA would drop these people back into the USSR to cause havoc in Operation Red Sox. So that story has nothing to do with the making of Animal Farm, but I just wanted you to know what kind of, just get a feel for the Wisner and how he operated. So Wisner called his plan to use the influence of the CIA to form public opinion via various front organizations, the Mighty Wurlitzer. A Wurlitzer is a big, huge pipe organ that they would use in the movie theaters, especially, you know, during silent films, and they'd play the emotions on, you know, on the piano. So he likened this to, you know, what he was doing. So from the book Orwell Subverted, Wisner likened his covert propaganda activities to a mighty Wurlitzer, boasting that he could play just about any tune from eerie horror music, Moscow is planning a purge, oh no, to light fantasies. And I'm just going to add in there, like, US is good. Yay. Okay. Yeah, because that's a fantasy. Many of his colleagues dismissed his concept as being over the edge, but his Wurlitzer did prove to be a wondrous machine. So that is how the CIA got involved in manufacturing consent, inventing reality. Like they threw in with Hollywood to create some of these films that they wanted for propaganda. So propaganda itself was realized by the father of public relations, Edward Bernays, to be a great marketing tool for corporations in the 1920s. But it had always been around. We can see it back throughout all of history, but in its modern form, Bernays dubbed it engineering consent. He wrote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society." It's so important to have, this manipulation. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitutes an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. These are the words of Bernays, not condemning the process, but seeing how this could help sell crap, any crap the capitalists got going, to the public. Basically creating consumerism, which I love too because I fall for it all the time. Also, my friend Esha from Historically wrote a piece back in 2019 about 1984. And she basically took like his, Orwell's, what he said outside the book and inside the book, some quotes from inside the book to prove that, it lined up perfectly with, doing this against what was going on in Britain at the time and all that stuff too. So you can basically see that too. Her pieces on Historically, that's Historic LY, and it's called Orwellian Propaganda on 1984. It was in 2019 when she wrote it. All right, so I am going to now play section 1. Give me 1 second.
Mass media for the many by the few. The mainstream media claim to be free and independent, objective and neutral, the watchdogs of democracy. A closer look suggests that they behave more like the lapdogs of plutocracy. He who pays the piper. The major news media, or press, are an inherent component of corporate America. Only 6 giant conglomerates, Time Warner, General Electric, Viacom, Bertelsmann, Walt Disney and News Corporation, own most of the print publications, movie studios, record labels, and radio and television programming in the United States, with additional holdings abroad. About 85% of the daily newspaper circulation in this country belongs to a few giant chains, and the trend in owner concentration continues unabated. All but a handful of the 150 movies distributed to mass markets each year are from 6 major studios. Big banks and corporations are among the top stockholders of mainstream media. Their representatives sit on the boards of all major print and broadcast media. After heavy lobbying and campaign donations, the broadcast industry secured passage of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Under this law, companies that previously were restricted to owning only 1 radio and 1 TV outlet in a local market now could own up to 6 radio and 2 television stations in that one area. Most of the nation's thousands of radio stations were bought up by large conglomerates, the biggest being the right-wing Clear Channel chain with 900 stations. With fewer independent stations came less public interest programming and more syndicated right-wing hate radio. Hosts who rail against liberals, environmentalists, peace demonstrators, socialists, and gays. Media bosses do not hesitate to kill stories they dislike and in other ways inject their own preferences into the news. As one group of investigators concluded years ago, the owners and managers of the press determine which person, which facts, which version of the facts, and which ideas shall reach the public. 2. In recent times, media bosses have refused to run stories or commentaries that reflected favorably on single-payer health insurance or unfavorably on free trade, globalization, and U.S. military intervention in other countries. In 2004, through its many radio stations, Clear Channel sponsored jingoistic Rally for America events around the country in support of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. That same year, Walt Disney Company blocked its Miramax division from distributing a documentary by Academy Award winner Michael Moore because it offered an unflattering picture of President Bush. Sinclair Group, the largest owner of local TV stations in the country, censored its ABC affiliates for reading the names of U.S. soldiers killed in Iraq. Sinclair sends recorded right-wing editorial commentary to its affiliates to be broadcast as local news and regularly makes large contributions to Republican candidates. Fox News, part of the vast media empire owned by right-wing billionaire Rupert Murdoch, refused to air an advertisement critical of Samuel Alito when he was being considered for the Supreme Court. The ad cited examples of the ideologically driven conservative opinions Alito promulgated while serving as an appeals court judge. The Fox station in New York also refused to broadcast a Democratic candidate's ad because it poked fun at President Bush and therefore was deemed disrespectful. Fox News reportedly quizzes journalistic applicants to be sure they are registered Republicans. Daily memos come down from the corporate office at Fox telling reporters and commentators what the story of the day should be and what point of view was expected when reporting it. Corporate advertisers are another powerful group who leave their political imprint on the media. As erstwhile president of CBS Frank Stanton remarked, "Since we are advertiser-supported, we must take into account the general objective and desires of advertisers as a whole." 5. To give one example, among many, a consumer reporter was fired by KCBS-TV in Los Angeles after automotive advertisers repeatedly complained to his bosses about his critical reports on car safety. Corporate sponsors might cancel advertising accounts not only when they feel that the reporting reflects poorly on their product, but when they perceive a liberal drift in news and commentary. To give one example, the prize-winning Whitney Report, a PBS News show that revealed U.S. backing of death squads and dictators in Central America and other hot issues, went off the air because it could not procure corporate funding. The media bosses control the journalists, not the other way around. Journalists can sometimes slip critical information into stories, but if they persist, their reports are spiked, they are reassigned, and soon, their careers are at risk. For reporting on the abuses of corporate America, Frances Sarah incurred the mass media for the many, by the few 165. Ire of her New York Times editors and was transferred to a Long Island beat. There she wrote articles on the Shoreham nuclear power plant that ran counter to the Times' pro-nuclear stance. Her final story was suppressed as biased. It reported that the plant was in serious financial trouble, which proved true. Sarah was never given another assignment. The managing editor of the Santa Fe New Mexican, David Mitchell, was sacked for running a series on the dangers of the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Unfortunately for him, the paper's owner was heavily involved in promoting nuclear technology. Tom Gutting, city editor of the Texas City Sun, was fired for criticizing the White House's performance in the hours after the 9/11 attack. So was columnist Dan Guthrie of the Daily Courier in Oregon. In a front-page editorial, Guthrie's bosses announced that criticism of the president and his associates needs to be responsible and appropriate. 8. Sometimes a journalist can be penalized for off-duty activities or comments. The San Francisco Chronicle fired a columnist for participating in a mass demonstration against the U.S. invasion of Iraq, even though California law explicitly states that employers cannot forbid or prevent employees from participating in political activities. After correspondent Ashley Banfield suggested at a campus talk that news coverage of the Iraq War was sanitized and Americans were not getting the whole story, her NBC contract was not renewed. Meanwhile, media owners attend political fundraisers and state dinners, contribute to election campaigns, and socialize with high-ranking office holders. But this is not seen as violating journalistic standards of neutrality and objectivity. Newspeople who consistently support the worldview of global capitalism and the national security state are the ones more likely to be rewarded with choice assignments, bonuses, and promotions. Additional blandishments, such as lucrative speakers' fees from moneyed interests, often blunt the recipient's critical edge. One might recall how the Shah of Iran, a brutal dictator detested by most of his people, received a glowing press in the United States. For 25 years, over 500 newspeople received the Shah's gifts and were invited to his lavish parties. The few who wrote critically of him were left off his gift list. When ABC correspondent John Stossel emerged as a laissez-faire ideologue, announcing that it is my job to explain the beauties of the free market, his career took off. An ardent supporter of chemicalized agribusiness, Stossel claimed that organic food could kill you and catastrophic global warming is a myth. He called for the privatization of Social Security, the curbing of environmental education, and the celebration of greed as a good thing for the economy. Instead of being challenged for his one-sided views, Stossel was given a 7-figure contract and a starring role in numerous ABC TV specials. The major networks claim their news shows are fair and balanced. But one study found that conservative guests on network opinion shows outnumbered liberal ones by 3-1. One in 2006, a supposedly liberal network, CNN, hired right-wing opinion maker and gambling addict William Bennett as a political commentator. More recently, Fox hired Glenn Beck, a right-wing radio host. Beck once called the indigent victims of Hurricane Katrina scumbags and talked of killing dissidents he disliked. He said he understood a mass killer in Alabama who must be like millions of Americans frustrated for being shut down by the liberal elites. Beck also called President Obama a racist who had a deep-seated hatred for white people. 12. Another Fox commentator, Bill O'Reilly, denounced critics of the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq as traitors, who along with all those clowns at the liberal radio network should be arrested by the FBI and put in chains. 13. On Fox News, the conservative-liberal imbalance was the most pronounced of any network. The more people watched Fox News, the more misinformed they were. Fox viewers were the most likely to believe one or more of the following. Iraq was linked to the al-Qaeda terrorist network. Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and world opinion favored the U.S. invasion of Iraq. All demonstrably false statements. On rare occasions, the news media will go against a strong corporate interest, as with the exposés on how the tobacco industry conspired to hook people on smoking by inserting extra nicotine in cigarettes, and how smoking caused cancer. We knew about the link between smoking and cancer for over half a century. But the press and policymakers gave the issue their attention only after a growing public outcry and numerous class action suits against big tobacco, and after the tobacco companies were banned from advertising in the major media. A host of other consumer issues such as carcinogens in cosmetics, radioactive materials in products, the use of industrial sludge as fertilizers, and the unsafe quality of many medications, along with manifold issues relating to the environment, still do not get much exposure.
Okay. How you doing, Rick?
Good. I forgot about John Stossel existing in the world.
I know.
I forgot about that guy entirely.
I did too until I was listening to this.
And it's kind of quaint compared to the right wing talking heads we have these days. Like, I would take a John Stossel over a Steve Bannon any day.
Oh yeah. For sure.
The podcasters are way further off the wall,
Oh yeah, and that's the thing I want to bring up too with this chapter, and I think I did bring it up somewhere in my notes, but he doesn't really get the internet on this side, and I think we were discussing this last week when my Speechify failed and we were just yammering, that he doesn't really get into the internet media here in this chapter, and I think that is something that should be looked at, because there's so much that has happened in the last 15 years, and that we know, and now it's coming out the AI and all this, that they're going to be able to track everything in social media, so we should watch out for that. Let me read a couple of my notes. Let's see what I wrote. I was going to play this thing from 2018. Do you remember on Fox News when they had it was the Sinclair Syndicate, and it had they all said this, they read off a script, and then CNN put them all together.
They can read the scripts.
I have the video, but it's annoying. Yeah, it's such an annoying video, but CNN put that together, and the funniest. You want me to play it? Okay, I'll play it.
Yeah, it's so corny, but it's so dead on.
Okay, you ready? It might get loud. I'm hoping that the volume turned down.
Homos look like. The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media make their platforms push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So that was put together by CNN, and I just laugh because I don't know if you recall, right before the 2024 election, that a whole bunch of the politicians read a script like that, and they were all saying the same thing, and that's all I could think of was, I'm like, you guys all made fun of this, and you're all doing this now. It was just, I don't know, it's just surreal to me how they do that.
It's weirdly coordinated, and everybody, and the thing is, that's local stations. Those are local. That's what your grandma watches, right?
Mm-hmm.
What your great grandma watches on the broadcast TV, and thinks that it's just the news, right? This is this isn't cable news. This isn't talking ahead opinion guy news. That's their nightly news reporter reading this script to people, and it's just gotten so blatant. It's so clear But it's the thing is, like, the only people that are still watching that legacy media are elderly people, and
Yeah.
they're even more susceptible to being convinced, right? And like that's where we're at. That's like how we have the political system that we do largely, is that they make up a huge part of the voter demographic. And well, all the discourse that everybody younger than them engages in is on social media. The legacy media is still super effective as a political tool, and I feel like most young people on the left have just like kind of given up on it.
Yeah.
And it'll be like at least another decade before that effect is gone. Like
Oh yeah.
my parents still watching. They're still watching. You know.
Yeah. I'm gonna tell you, I know people in my like Gen X in their 50s and stuff that watch that crap too, though, but not a lot. I mean, much less than before. Like, and I think a lot of them have even dropped off watching it more so in the last 10 years than they used to. So, you know, that's a good thing, I guess. I was trying to like think of like, when did I realize like the media stuff? I will tell you, I read Manufacturing Consent back in the 90s. I was an aspiring journalist. This was like my third time going to college, and you know, now I was going to be a journalist because I had just worked for a magazine. I was forever a student. And so I don't, it wasn't through school that I read it. It was, I can't even recall who, or if I just,
it was because of the mind virus that was spreading on campus, clearly. How else do you read an anarchist like Noam Chomsky?
I know. Well, I was an anarchist back then, so I don't know. But and not that I believe Noam wrote much of the book. I think it was all the other guy, Herman, writing it. But
I realized that recently, that like Noam Chomsky sucks, but he didn't write that book, and nor a lot of the things that like have his name on it.
Yeah,
it's always like co-written, and it's, I don't know. It's funny like how many people like go to him for political advice in like activism and stuff, and it's just like the guy who's a linguistics professor.
Yeah,
right. Like,
exactly.
That's...
But I was trying to think, and I was like, well, I read that, but I know that I still, and especially because I was aspiring to be a journalist, I was still watching the crap. Like I was even watching CNN at the time. I was watching CNN after 9/11. So this is where it comes to. So after 9/11, I watched CNN for like 2 weeks straight. My brain was rotted, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I just, one day I was like, what the F am I doing? Like, why am I brain rotting myself on CNN? Because this is just ridiculous. So it was really, I think it was 9/11 that really, maybe, because I felt like, okay, I kind of knew about it, but you feel like, oh, I can hold that off. I can not succumb to it. But I'm telling you, right after 9/11, because everyone was a little, their heads weren't on straight and everything. And I knew people like, not that I had someone directly involved, but I, I know a guy who lost his daughter, you know what I mean? Like I was working with them and stuff like that. So there, just stuff like that. Like, so, it did hit a little bit. But I was like in this weird thing for 2 weeks. And I just had to shake myself out of it. I'm like, why am I listening to this crap? This is all just, because it wasn't quite, I mean, it was definitely banging the drums, but it wasn't quite to where it was after the new year, like in 2002, I feel like it got worse, where they were trying to convince us of weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, I really think that that's what finally broke me from mass media.
Yeah, I remember when they added the news ticker, and that started to be like controversial. Like all the different cable news stations started to add the scrolling thing across the bottom, and I was like, it started to like at that point for me be like, oh, this is like clearly brainwashing, right? Because like you can't read and listen at the same time.
Yeah.
you're like subconsciously absorbing what the news ticker says, or you're subconsciously absorbing what they're saying while you're reading the news ticker, and so like there's no way to like critically think about all the information that's going in at the same time.
I kind of remember people talking about it, but I never really thought too much about it.
It was controversial when they first started doing it because people were like, what is, because it like, again, like this is the stuff that they adopted from ESPN. Like, the cable news networks were not doing well until they started copying the sports media channels, and the sports media channels always had, you know, the scores for all the other games going across the bottom. And that's like, I mean, that's really like what was going on. Like they're adding the scores from, they're adding all these other.
Yeah, they're making an entertainment. They're making it, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not paying attention to, if like whatever they're talking about at this given second is not your team, right? They're not talking about your team. You can
obviously, when I was watching the news back then and they were talking about that, I was not paying attention right. No, I was probably reading the ticker and they were talking about it.
Right, there you go. No, this is the thing. It's like it's such a, and like that was, you know, this is like early attempts, and today, and like now it's the chat, right? Like you can just get stuck reading the chat while people are not.
I can't, like, I have to have one thing. My mom could do, like, watch TV, read a book, and have a conversation with someone. I don't know how, but she could. I can only have one focus at a time. Like, I'm either walking or chewing gum. That's it. I just want to, so back in 2018, when Yemen was being hit hard, I joined an online group of people led by an indie journalist, Walker Bragman, if anyone knows him. He's a little on the liberal side, but you know, he's a good guy. To try to get mainstream media to cover the starvation and civilian murders going on there by the Saudis, assisted and backed by the U.S. and other Western countries. At the point, 14 million people were on the verge of dying from starvation, and it was deemed the biggest humanitarian crisis. Like, that's a lot of people, right? And our mainstream media refused to talk about it. Just refused to talk about it. And so we had some hashtags. We just kept bugging all the mainstream media people. And then finally, we got 2 minutes from Chris Hayes. We got him for 2 minutes and 8 seconds talking on Yemen in August of 2018. And we felt like we were celebrating over that 2 minutes. We thought it was great. We were like, yay.
2 minutes. 2 minutes on the Boomer TV, right? Like that's, and this is the thing. It's like they just won't. It's like it's not even like they're going to give you a spin on it. They're just going to not talk about that.
Yeah.
And well, yeah. And we see that kind of translate to the social media, because like that for a while, that's like what especially during campaign season, the liberals were starting to refuse to talk about Palestine. They're like, oh no, we just don't talk about that on our live. It might get taken down, right?
Yeah.
It's like, even if it isn't going to get taken down, it's convenient for them to be like, oh, we can't talk. Like, obviously, that's like, there's entire sections of TikTok there. That's the only thing they talk about. They're not going to get taken down for talking about it. They just, you know, have a convenient excuse. And I think there's like this chilling effect of the way that social media apps work, where you can kind of get away with that. And spreading that idea is pretty easy, being like, well, you can't talk about that on here, or you shouldn't talk about that on here. Or if you want to continue to get more followers and likes, you better not talk about that on here. It's, you know, it's not dissimilar. It's basically like we're all citizen journalists now, but it's like the problem of journalism and like the way that it operates in accordance with the media hasn't really changed. It's like the people who are saying the things that the powers that be want to be said are the ones that get promoted, and the people who are not saying those things get squashed. You know, like you might not get removed entirely, or you might get removed entirely. But even if you're not removed entirely, it's going to be suppressed. It's not going to be, you know, you get shadow banned, etc.
Yeah, I have a little list from the Palestine stuff to go through after one of these sections. There was one other thing I was going to bring up here. In 1921, Lenin wrote in a letter to G. Myasnikov, he wrote, all over the world, wherever there is capitalist freedom of the press means freedom to buy up newspapers, to buy writers, to bribe, buy and fake public opinion for the benefit of the bourgeoisie. This, of course, is after 1917 and the revolution, and Lenin is talking to one of the soon-to-be expelled Bolsheviks. So Myasnikov was one of the left coms. Like, he comes out as a left com. He's a Bolshevik, but he's one of the ones right after. And he's not happy that he was like saying like, one of the lines that what he wrote, I have some of the other stuff written here. So what he was saying in one of his speeches was freedom of the press from the monarchists to the anarchists inclusively. So he was calling for Lenin to open the press up to everybody again. And Lenin's like, no, because like our people, we just fought for 4 years now. And you want me to go to the people and say, let's open the press up. And the people are going to go, what have we been fighting for 4 years? Who are you opening it up for? We don't need the capitalists to have it. You know what I mean? So there's the thing about like who has the press has the power is basically the point in that. So I just wanted to bring up that. But let me play section 2 now.
The ideological monopoly. Conservative commentators repeatedly accuse the media of liberal bias. In fact, most daily newspapers offer an editorial perspective ranging from blandly centrist to ultra-conservative. Over the last 70 years, the Republican presidential candidate received more newspaper endorsements than the Democrat in 16 out of 18 elections. Surveys show that Washington journalists, though more liberal on cultural issues such as abortion and gay rights, are more than twice as likely as the general public to support corporate free trade and far more in favor of trimming Medicare and Social Security. So nervous are journalists about being called liberal that they take pains to criticize or ignore progressive leaders while shining up the rightists. Consider how the liberal media collaborated in the campaign waged to impeach President Clinton for lying about a sexual tryst he had with an intern, an act that itself was not unlawful. Then compare that to how no major media called for President Bush's impeachment for the momentous lies he repeatedly uttered in order to justify his aggression against Iraq, claiming that Iraq was linked to al-Qaeda and that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, lies of immense political dimension. The expert guests appearing on newscasts are predominantly government officials, corporate heads, and members of conservative think tanks. Likewise, TV pundits, radio talk show hosts, and syndicated columnists are predominantly and often vehemently conservative. Both radio and television are awash with the likes of Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage, who aggressively pound home a message of reaction and hostility toward anything resembling liberal reform. Of the liberal commentators who are hailed as representing the left, many are little more than pro-capitalist, middle-of-the-road tepid centrist, as former New York Times syndicated liberal columnist Anthony Lewis candidly described himself. These tepid souls are nowhere as far left as the conservatives are far right. The whole left portion of the political spectrum is mostly shut out of the mainstream media. Still, critical information does make its way into the media, to the great annoyance of conservatives. Much of it is cited in various chapters of this book. What often is missing is any cohesive analysis of the significance of that information. And in many instances, even the most basic information is lacking if it reflects unfavorably on those with significant economic power. Consider the media's presentation of these topics. Ideology. For at least the last 30 years, the ultra-conservatives have enjoyed a near monopoly in the propagation of political ideology, constantly pounding home this message: don't look to government to solve our problems. Government is the problem. The free market would solve our ills. Were it not for bureaucratic meddling from Washington, the environment is doing fine. If the tree huggers had their way, all our corporations would be closed and we would be out of jobs. We have the best healthcare system in the world, the best of everything for that matter. America was founded as a Christian nation, and we should keep it that way. America faces a world filled with enemies who are only waiting to pounce upon us. The latte-sipping liberal elites look scornfully upon our American way of life. They seek to divest us of our family values while imposing their secular amorality upon us. Liberals prefer to see hard-working Americans exploited by welfare chiselers rather than teaching people to be self-reliant. Liberals bring us divorce, greedy labor unions, collectivism, a weak military, socialism, gun control, and policies of tax spend. Through a process of relentless and repetitive messaging, the reactionaries pounded home the above themes. With enormous sums of money made available to them by rich corporate right-wingers, they formed whole new networks like Fox and the Christian Broadcasting Network. They started numerous new magazines and other publications. They bought up hundreds of radio stations and sponsored mean-spirited reactionary commentators who were nothing but well-paid propagandists. All this time, the Democrats and liberals have done little by way of developing a media message machine that could counter the right-wing propaganda juggernaut. They address themselves to this or that issue as such issues arise, but they do little about offering general principles and salient information to the public. Economy. News reports on business rely almost entirely on business sources. The overall corporate economy is more celebrated in the abstract than critically examined in its specifics. The dumping of corporate diseconomies onto the public, the outsourcing of capital and jobs to low-wage countries, the increasing accumulation and concentration of wealth. For the super-rich, the tendency toward chronic recession, inflation and underemployment and other such developments are treated superficially, if at all. Poverty remains an unexplained phenomenon in our capitalist paradise. Whether portraying the poor as unworthy idlers or innocent unfortunates, the press seldom gives critical attention to the market forces that create and victimize low-income people. The press has failed to explain the real impact of the national debt and how it generates an upward redistribution of income and undermines public sector spending. Almost nothing is said in the mainstream media about how corporate America regularly puts profits before people, or how free trade globalism is really monopoly corporate globalism. Most media commentators were unwilling to see chronic overproduction and depressed wages as having anything to do with the severe economic crisis of 2008 to 2009, preferring to blame the recession on the malfeasance of individual speculators rather than on the systemic dysfunction of an unregulated, untrammeled capitalism. Elections. Media coverage of electoral campaigns focuses mostly on the contest per se, who will run, who will win, and what campaign ploys are playing well with the public. Relatively little attention is given to policy content. News commentators act more like theater critics, reviewing the candidate's performance and style. One study found that more than two-thirds of campaign coverage centers on insider strategy and political maneuvering rather than substantive issues. Progressive candidates find themselves dependent for mass media for the many by the few 169. Exposure on mass media that are owned by the same conservative interests they are criticizing. Hoping to educate the public on the issues, they discover that the media allow little or no opportunity for them to make their position understandable to larger publics that might be willing to listen. The sheer paucity of information can make meaningful campaign dialogue nearly impossible. The major media ignored or summarily dismissed the many questions about widespread fraud in the 2000 and 2004 presidential elections, swiftly declaring a Republican winner despite flagrant irregularities in both contests. The media's systemic ideological role has been to preserve the legitimacy of a national election that some critics have shown to be demonstrably stolen. Crime. The press has helped create the lock-'em-up crime craze throughout America. Because of the increasing coverage that both the news and entertainment media gave to crime, the number of respondents who ranked crime as the prime problem jumped sixfold, even as the nationwide homicide rate actually dropped by 20%. Corporate crime, however, is another story, largely an underreported one. The media will denounce particularly greedy and corrupt CEOs, the ones who get caught, while leaving untouched the free market corporate system that produces them. Affirmative action. Instead of treating affirmative action as an attempt to redress long-standing injustices, the media has frequently overlooked the persistence of racism and sexism in many walks of life, leaving people with the impression that African Americans and women are enjoying special privileges at the expense of white males. Labor. Most newspapers have large staffs for business news but not a single labor reporter. Reporters seldom enlist labor's views on national questions, whereas corporate leaders are interviewed regularly. Ordinary workers are virtually never treated as knowledgeable sources about work issues. There are no daily or periodic reports about the number of workers killed or injured on the job. Unions are usually noticed only when they go on strike, but the issues behind the strike, such as occupational safety or loss of benefits, are rarely acknowledged. The misleading impression is that labor simply wants too much. Unions make demands while management makes offers. Political protests and globalization. Citizens who exercise their democratic rights under the First Amendment by launching protests against official policy often are given short shrift. The hundreds of thousands who have demonstrated around the world against free trade treaties have been characterized as violence-prone zealots and flat-earthers. The major media treat globalization as a benign and natural process, rather than a transnational corporate strategy to roll back public regulations and democratic protections in countries around the world. With good reason did David Rockefeller, during a speech at the 1991 Bilderberg Conference, declare, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. 21. Global empire and war. Reports about U.S. involvement in foreign affairs usually rely heavily on government releases. The media support U.S. military interventions into other countries, accepting with little critical examination official assumptions that Washington's war policy is motivated by concerns for democracy, national security, and peace. Some pundits, like New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman, are passionate promoters of global corporatism and U.S. military attacks on smaller, weaker nations. Friedman called for bombing Iraq over and over and over again. One of his favorite slogans was "Give war a chance," which he used in support of U.S. aggressions against Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Over 1 million Iraqi deaths resulted from the U.S. invasion and occupation, while billions of U.S. dollars have been unaccountably lost in Iraq. But the media have given relatively little attention to this immense loss of life and treasure. Commentators stress the importance of maintaining U.S. military might and credibility. Little, if any, positive exposure is given to anti-imperialist struggles or to domestic critics of us overseas interventions. The corporate media, along with NPR and PBS, portrayed the Vietnam War, the U.S. invasions of Grenada and Panama, the destruction of Yugoslavia, and the decade-long bombing attacks, and subsequent invasion of Iraq pretty much as the White House and the Pentagon wanted, with little attention given to the underlying imperial interests and the devastation wreaked by U.S. forces. Human rights violations in communist North Korea and China are repeatedly alluded to, whereas U.S. supported terrorism in scores of countries, utilizing death squads, massacres, and mass detentions, received scant notice, if any. The press downplayed or ignored outright the slaughter of some 500,000 Indonesians by the U.S.-supported militarists of that country, and the extermination campaign waged by those same militarists in East Timor. The media made little mention of the massive repression of dissident populations in Uruguay, Guatemala, Turkey, El Salvador, Argentina, Haiti, Honduras, Nigeria, Palestine, Zaire, the Philippines, and other U.S.-supported free market regimes. While supportive of right-wing pro-capitalist regimes, the media are strenuously negative toward leftist movements and governments such as Castro's Cuba and Chavez's Venezuela. The media have had little to say about U.S.-supported counter-revolutionary mercenary forces in Angola, Mozambique, Nicaragua, and elsewhere, whose blood-drenched campaigns took hundreds of thousands of lives. Meanwhile, the space program is reported the way NASA wants, with scarcely a word given to those who criticize its costs and the serious damage it does to the Earth's protective ozone layer.
Okay. What did I have notes on that? I first said, I'm not sure why people who support liberalism with their full chest are worried about being seen as liberals. But anywho. Okay, so I went into newspapers.com, which I like to do, and it's fun for me, to try to find out when the term liberal media started getting used. And first, of course, I was seeing in Britain it was getting used because there is actually liberal and conservative, they use those terms that we don't quite use for our parties here, right? So where I was seeing it pejoratively in the U.S. wasn't until the 50s, and it was the late 50s. And the first article I got where it was conflating liberal media with communism was in 1958. Then I saw an article from 1960 about the liberal media agreeing with the people living in D.C. that they should be able to vote. Yes, folks, as Rick knows probably, that in D.C. they didn't have the vote until 1961, and they still don't have representation. So, and all our territories can't even vote or have representation. So, that is what's going on there. And the guy that was writing this, about the liberal media, he told the people in DC that they should move elsewhere. And that it sounded so familiar to me with communism. So.
If you want democracy, you better move somewhere other than the capital of the United States of America. What did you expect?
Exactly.
It's very, very silly.
Yeah.
DC politics is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
They got rid of a mayor because he got caught smoking crack, and then they had to bring him back.
I remember. Yeah.
He was the only guy who could get. He was the only guy who could get the job done. They don't get to they'd have to have the budget passed by Congress. So
yeah,
they have to be able to pull some finagling. I don't know, the fact that they could easily just not report on a bunch of stuff before. I think that is one thing that has changed a little bit in social media. Like they can suppress it only so much, but like if people force it in, like there's enough activism, we can force them to at least address.
We got 2 minutes from Chris Hayes. I mean, yeah, but they do have to, and that's the thing. So even if they're not addressing it on the TV, you've seen them address things on social media too. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you do kind of catch them into having to address certain things.
Well, it's always interesting talking to liberals about something that hasn't been addressed by the mainstream media, and they have no talking points, so they're like flying blind. I remember talking to one of the guys who runs the Lincoln Project. Like he used to run the Lincoln Project page for Instagram in 2016 or 2020.
Oh God, yeah.
Like it's like the beginning of the elections, like this past summer, beginning of the election it was Biden, I think, was still in at the time, and I started talking to him about Palestine, and he's like basically like, well, I don't know anything about that. He's like trying to promote voting for Democrats. I'm like, you don't have anything to say about that? He's like, no, I don't know. And it's like, they can't. That's way harder to get away with on social media because there's no avoiding the question. People can just come in and ask you, and so you have to have a take for everything now. That doesn't mean that they are any less likely to like lie about it or like use it to redirect to some other issue or whatever, but there's always a take now, and I think that is something that has meaningfully changed between social media.
I mean, and just the fact how much Hillary Clinton hates social media, like it's just so funny to me because that is exactly what was happening. Is they were getting caught in their lies, like things were coming out, you know. And so like between like the media and the politicians and, you know, I mean, the capitalists don't care. Well, you have ones like Elon or something that will be there because they have a huge ego and they need the boost to be on social media. But, you know, most of them aren't really on social media doing stuff. But, you know, you just get like the politicians now being basically holding their feet to the fire because, you know, they decided not to answer their phones anymore. And then they cry about people coming at them on social media. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so funny to me. It's like, you're supposed to be representing us.
Even then, a lot of times they'll just turn the comments off if it gets too bad.
Oh yeah, they'll do that too. You can ignore.
It's just like, oh, none of that.
See, I couldn't do that. Like, I can't ignore things. I have to I have to hold, like, I am not going to address this. The person only has 100 followers. I don't need to address it. Like, that's my problem. Like, I'll just start going and then I'll spend like 8 hours in a fight online, trolling back trolls that are trolling me. It's lots of fun, but, yeah, there was something else. What were you saying? You said something and it sparked something in my head and now I forgot it. Sorry. But, so just talking about like that stuff, like how, move to another country, or like move out of the state if you don't like the voting. But like the thing like that just gets to me is like, if they actually understood, like if people actually understood what communism was, they would be communists. And the media does not allow you to understand what communism is. So, like, we're kind of stuck with that. And they just, too many of the working class have believed that gambling for a better life in the capitalist system is much better than actually putting their class in charge of things, which would guarantee them and everyone they know a better life. But what can we expect since we all have been fed a lie for the last 500 plus years that competition is the way of the world? Through the media, we are allowed to consume. And what comes into my mind when I think of competition is always like growing up watching ABC's Wide World of Sports. I don't know if anyone even knows what I'm talking about, but they had this, it was always the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And like, that's all I ever think about. Even like in capitalist competition is that line, the thrill of victory. Like it's all like it's like a dopamine thing, you know? So what is,
it's like that's the fight. They
Yeah.
want to control the they want to keep people in that mode. And that's why the news is like sports entertainment. That's why.
Yeah.
They want it to feel like they're talking about the competition and they're talking about the strategy. That stat I thought was really interesting. We said 2/3 was 2/3 of election coverage is about strategy, and only 1/3 of it is about actually like the policies and stuff that they're talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, that it really is like that. It's a sports game, right? It's not about like,
Oh yeah.
it's about, they want to talk about the passing yards, right? They don't want to just like talk about the points on the field.
Yeah.
Right? Like they want to talk, like they have to yap about that, and they don't like bring up the score all that often.
Yep.
In sports commentary.
No, it's all team. It's the same thing. Like the red team and the blue team, and they're doing the same thing. Like they're just the media's like just reporting on them like that. You know, just like it's a little game being played, and sadly, it hurts a whole bunch of people the way that they do it. So. What did I say? So my last note on this was, what is called liberal media is just the propaganda arm for both parties. It is the media that purposely manipulates the people to form opinions that align with what the people in charge want. And if you have been paying attention to anything in the series, you know that the people in charge are not just elected officials, but the ones who pull the purse strings, the capitalists. So, we talk about like how, you know, like it was brought up too with Bernays, the quote from Bernays saying like, there is like this invisible, you know, and like people will get into this whole conspiracy thing, and it's not a conspiracy. Like, I mean, it's whoever has the money has the power, and that's what it is. Like, it's not even being hidden. I don't know why people like think it's all like, oh no, there's like you know, like a dark cabal or something, whatever they call it, like this evil group of, no, it's the capitalists. I don't know why people can't get that. All right. What?
Just like one quick note is that like one of the ways that they're moving towards controlling this thing, like when you have like, you know, 1 million journalists on social media instead of just like a handful, it seems like one of the ways that they're going to use to control that is through like AI, right? Like they're creating AI friends for everyone. And so they're going to dilute the idea of how many people around you actually believe this thing versus that thing.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, and the capitalists, like they have control over social media. A lot of people act like they have less maybe at first, but because they own the infrastructure, they're always going to have the upper hand.
They can always correct pretty quickly. Whatever the people do and get a hand on, they correct that. You know what I mean? Like they counter that pretty quickly, and they do it because they have the power and they have the media and they have all this other outside stuff, so they can just sit there and go, no, this is the way it is. Like, we're inventing your reality. You know what I mean? Like, this is it. So it's, yeah. All right, let me play section 3.
Serving officialdom. Getting too close to the truth can prove harmful. In a series of deeply researched articles in the San Jose Mercury News, reporter Gary Webb exposed the CIA's involvement in the drug traffic between the Contras and inner-city dealers in the United States. Webb was swiftly subjected to a barrage of counterattacks from the Washington Post, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, the major TV, mass media for the many by the few 171, networks, and other keepers of permissible opinion. They accused him of saying things he had not said while ignoring the more damning and well-substantiated heart of his findings. Eventually, Webb's editor caved into the pressure, making a public self-criticism for having published the series. Webb left the Mercury News, his career in shambles. A subsequent report by the CIA itself largely confirmed his charges. In 1998, CNN producers April Oliver and Jack Smith ran a story accusing the U.S. military of using sarin, a highly lethal nerve gas, in an operation in Laos in 1970 that killed about 100 people, including 2 American defectors. An immediate storm of abuse descended upon Oliver and Smith from the Pentagon. CNN hastily issued a fawning retraction and fired the 2 producers. Oliver and Smith put together a report showing that their story was based entirely on testimony by U.S. military personnel, including participants in the operation who stood by their stories. Their report received almost no attention in the media. Scores of supposedly independent and objective journalists moved back and forth in their careers between media and government in what has been called the revolving door. David Gergen served in the Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Clinton administrations, and in between was an editor at U.S. News and World Report and a PBS commentator. Pat Buchanan was a staff writer for President Nixon, a columnist and TV opinion show host for CNN, a staff writer for President Reagan, then a CNN host again. More than 400 U.S. journalists, including nationally syndicated columnists, editors, and major publishers, have carried out covert. Actually, Lou, I think it was more than just my being in the right place at the right assignments for the Central Intelligence Agency over the last 4 decades, gathering intelligence abroad or publishing the kind of stories that create a domestic climate of opinion supportive of U.S. interventionism. Included among them were such prominent press moguls as William Paley, erstwhile head of CBS, Henry Luce, late owner of Time Inc., and Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, late publisher of the New York Times. The CIA has owned more than 240 media operations around the world, including newspapers, magazines, publishing houses, radio and television stations, and wire services. Many third world countries get more news from the CIA and other Western sources than from third world news organizations. Stories exposing the major media's complicity with the CIA themselves have been suppressed by the major media. If Cuban or Chinese or Venezuelan journalists were shown to work for their respective countries' intelligence agencies, and if they were found to be intermittently occupying official positions within their governments, including secret operations, it would be taken as a sure sign that these nations lacked an independent press. Those investigative journalists who persist in unearthing troubling truths often run into difficulty. The Justice Department won a Supreme Court decision allowing the government to issue subpoenas requiring news people to disclose their sources to grand jury investigators, in effect forcing the press to be an investigative arm of the very officialdom over whom it is supposed to act as a watchdog. One study found that more than 3,500 subpoenas were served on members of the news media in 1 year alone. Dozens of reporters have been jailed or threatened with prison terms for trying to protect their sources by refusing to hand over materials and tapes. Such government coercion creates a chilling effect, encouraging the press to avoid trouble from officialdom by censoring itself. Government officials give choice leads to sympathetic journalists and withhold information from troublesome ones. They meet regularly with media bosses to discuss specific stories. Every day, the White House, the Pentagon, and other agencies release thousands of self-designed reports to the media, many of which are then uncritically transmitted to the public as news from independent sources. The Bush Jr. administration secretly confected favorable news reports about itself by hiring actors to pose as journalists, producing phony video news releases that were distributed and broadcasted as news by hundreds of local TV stations. The White House also paid several real journalists tens of thousands of dollars in government funds to produce news and opinion pieces that promoted the administration's policies. According to the Government Accountability Office, such acts violated the law against spreading covert propaganda within the United States at public expense. But the Republican-controlled Congress took no action against the president. The Bush people also hired someone to pose as a journalist under a fictitious name so that he could ask rehearsed questions of the president or his press secretary at news conferences.
I love his hatred towards the Bush family. Anytime he can bring up Bush, he's just like, Bush, Bush, Bush. It's just so funny. It's like Lenin and Kautsky or Plekhanov. I don't know which one.
I think Parenti is like H.W. Bush's biggest hater. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot more for W. Like, the shoe guy probably would win for W.
Yeah, I don't know. Parenti really, I don't know. He really didn't like the whole family, I think. I think he took issues with all the Bushes, but yes, he definitely did not like George Sr. and even more so, like he talked about the Bushes more so than Reagan even, you know? and you know,
because this is the thing that a lot of people like. HW was the brains behind the Reagan administration anyway. He was the guy doing all the CIA shit.
yeah.
So like,
He was.
It's like.
I just told someone the other day that he was the head of the CIA at one point, and they didn't know that. I was like, yep. It explains a lot. But
He had basically 12 years of running America's foreign policy by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
that's like, and then there was Clinton, and then there was another,
8 years
more
because he had
Bush
his son was doing
with
So
Cheney, who was
he
still,
had-
like,
But like even his father was still involved because he was like, I mean, that whole thing with Iraq was definitely about his father. You know what I mean? Like,
no, it was with Cheney as his babysitter, right? Like,
Yeah.
to make sure he didn't screw it up too much.
Exactly.
He put the charismatic dumb one in charge rather than
mm-hmm.
one of the smarter kids that he had, right? Like that was.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So
This is why they're really mad about Trump. Though that whole section of the Bushes, they're mad about Trump actually because like it was supposed to be fucking Jeb, and
oh yeah.
nope.
Yeah, but what they should be more mad at Clinton for that than. Oop, you're making lots of noises. Should be more mad at Clinton over that. Like knowing, like we know that they used the Pied Piper. We know that that's what the Democrats were doing. So we know that they once again used the media to push Trump. Even leaving the camera on an empty podium, you know what I mean? Like, just to, he's coming out. Like, instead of going over to, say, Bernie talking, they would leave the camera, I don't know if this was MSNBC or CNN, I can't remember now. And they would just leave the camera there waiting for Trump to come talk, where they could have been, talking about other stuff. So, the whole, when the WikiLeaks thing came out and it had, the files from Podesta and it explained the Pied Piper, and that was McCaskill's way of staying in her seat. Like, that's what she used to stay in her seat, was to elevate the bad Republicans, the ones that she didn't think could beat her. And Hillary didn't think that Trump, Carson, or Cruz could beat her. So those are the ones that, she chose to be elevated, or her team, or I don't know if she personally chose them, but, So maybe some of that anger should be there. I did say I was going to, bring up some of the people that got, media people who got, lost their jobs and stuff over anything on Palestine. But I'm going to bring up Mark Lamont Hill back in 2018. He was fined over his stance on Palestine, and that was well before October 7th, and even before October 7th. And I actually remember when this happened, when they hired that young journalist, Emily Wilder, and the AP did, and then this group came about and searched through her social media and found that she had, positive things to say about Palestine, or, she wasn't even saying negative things about Israel. She was just can we not hurt these people? You know what I mean? And so she gets canned. Jackson Frank was a sports commentator for the Philly basketball and was fired for posting just solidarity with Palestine. Art Forum editor-in-chief David Velasco was canned over publishing and signing an open letter of artists. I remember that. I remember that letter. So he had signed that letter, and he got fired. It was just calling for a ceasefire. That's all that letter was calling for. Michael Eisen, who is Jewish himself and also has family in Israel, was an editor for eLife before he posted and commented against the actions Israel was taking on an Onion headline, a joke headline, dying Gazans criticized for not using last words to condemn Hamas. And then Harper's Bazaar editor Samira Nasser had to apologize for criticizing Israel. and for the blockade of electricity and water. And I bring up Mehdi Hasan because, I mean, though they say, oh, it was just a structuring thing, and he is at The Guardian, there's something fishy that went there. Like he lost his show after all he said was, we shouldn't blindly believe anything Hamas says, but we should, but why should we believe what your government says either? Talking about Israel. And so like he gets moved off of MSNBC, right? Is that what he was on, or CNN? I get the two always mixed up. So, all right, let's listen. Do you have anything else you want to add here, Rick?
No, just that it was neat that Mehdi Hasan ended up starting his own network over there.
Yeah.
And I think that, and this is the other, it's an upside and a downside because it also works for like the very right-wing pundits. But now when people get removed from a position for whatever reason, even if it's the legitimate reason, they can maintain their careers post like legacy media by just like starting their own social media brands.
Yeah.
We're seeing that more and more.
Like
the thing is, like, even if Trump is ever removed, unless he's like gone, he's going to be have like a cult of personality on his own social media site till he is dead.
Oh yeah, and even after it'll be there. There'll be someone to take up the man. Like they'll I don't know, champion Eric or something. Not Eric. Eric Trump kind of scares me. I don't know. And it's nothing that he said or did. It's just the way he looks. To me, he's just scary looking.
All of his kids are strange for one reason or the other. And this thing is like, we know too much about them, right? Like, I don't think we need to know anything about the president's fucking kids.
No.
We always do, because that's the kind of shit they focus on and not on the actual policies that are being passed. It's always like,
yep,
Barron Trump's suitcase or whatever.
And that is also thanks to media. So that actually is what we're talking about. So, all right, let me play section 4. There's only 2 more sections, so.
Mass media for the many, by the few 173. Political entertainment. The entertainment media undergo a rigorous political censorship. Even the New York Times admits that network production and standards departments have reduced their policing of sexual and other cultural taboos, but network censors continue to be vigilant when it comes to overseeing the political content of television films. 33 television shows and films that treat anti-imperialist and anti-corporate themes have trouble getting sponsors and funding. Even if produced, they are likely to get very limited distribution. Such was the fate of movies like Salt of the Earth, Burn, Winter Soldier, Salvador, Reds, 1900, Matewan, and Romero. What is considered a political or non-political film is itself a political judgment. Almost all mainstream entertainment is political in one way or another. Even movies and television shows that do not promote a specifically political storyline may propagate images and themes that support militarism, imperialism, racism, sexism, authoritarianism, and other undemocratic values. In the entertainment world, adversities are caused by ill-willed individuals and cabals, never by the injustices of the socio-economic system. Problems are solved by individual daring do rather than by organized collective effort. In war movies like Black Hawk Down, Stripes, and Heartbreak Ridge, the U.S. military is almost always portrayed sympathetically, locked in battle against some pernicious foe, never serving as an instrument of U.S. empire building. The Pentagon has maintained a cozy relationship with the entertainment industry for years, providing armored equipment, materiel, base access, and even troops for battle scenes. In exchange, the military brass imposes script changes that portray the military in a completely favorable light and aid in the recruitment and retention of personnel. In the media's entertainment world, nefarious violence is met with righteous violence, although it is often difficult to distinguish the two. By the time he finishes elementary school, a typical American male child will have seen 8,000 TV murders and many thousands more assaults and other acts of violence. Studies indicate that people who watch a lot of crime shows have a higher fear of crime in urban minorities and are more willing to embrace authoritarian solutions. Women are still marketed as sexual objects in ads and storylines, but in recent years they sometimes are also depicted as intelligent and capable persons, occupying positions of authority and responsibility. The same holds for African Americans, although they still appear far less often than whites in leading roles. Latinos are the most underrepresented group in primetime television, closely followed by Asian Americans, while Native Americans are virtually invisible except for the hackneyed cowboy and Indian flicks. Years ago, African Americans predictably played servants and street criminals. Now they play police and street criminals, still usually in minor roles. The black police captain scolding the hero cop and the black judge admonishing courtroom lawyers have become new African American stock characters. African Americans abound in primetime sitcoms, but the more serious struggles faced by the African American community in almost every area of life and work are rarely afforded realistic portrayal. African American actors still experience a shortage of racially nonspecific roles dealing with real-life problems that can affect anyone regardless of ethnicity. There have been some notable exceptions to the dismal fare served up to mass audiences. Movies like A Civil Action and Erin Brockovich cast a revealing light on the venality of corporate polluters. Iron-Jawed Angels gave a fine portrayal of the women's suffragist movement. North Country depicted the struggle by female miners against workplace sexist harassment. Both Syriana and Good Night and Good Luck pursued topics that were critical of the powers that be. However, most films and television shows produced in the business-owned entertainment world give scarce attention, if any, to important and potentially fascinating social, cultural, political, and historical themes. In recent years, the public broadcasting system has become more sensitive to race, gender, and gay issues, but still virtually ignores working-class concerns out of fear of alienating corporate underwriters. When labor unions have funded documentaries and dramas having a working-class perspective, public television bosses usually have refused to run them, claiming that labor represents a special interest.
Okay, let's see what I have for notes on that. Okay, so I talked about Animal Farm in the book I started reading called Orwell Subverted, which is looking at the CIA, but I also started looking at a book called J. Edgar Hoover Goes to Hollywood. I actually got through most of that now. That's by John Spartolatti. I just like saying that last name. This dives into the FBI's involvement in Hollywood. Just a note, the FBI's involvement in Hollywood began early on, but then they didn't get too serious until WW2. Let me read to you from the book about one of the groups in 1920s when they were doing this early on. They kind of like took a break from it because I think they scared, like after this little thing that I'm going to talk about, they kind of scared them a little. They weren't thinking on using the movies as much to make these films that were about like, work and, that would show like the contradictions and stuff like that. So independent left-wing filmmakers, not Hollywood artists, were the first to raise the Bureau's fears concerning film propaganda. In November 1920, the director of Connecticut Department's Americanization, there was Departments of Americanization. Robert Deming alarmed the Justice Department to the threat mounted by the Labor Film Service, a New York-based company that had been described by one historian as the most ambitious of the left independents in the 1920s. Deming received his information from Guy Hedlund, who was a protege of D.W. Griffith, and also the director of a movie called The Contrast from 1921, that, for the group LFS. Deming forwarded the Labor Film Service's literature, noting a peculiar flavor about it that is not pleasant to this Connecticut official. The existence of the Labor Film Service indicated that Lenin, and they spelled Lenin wrong, it's kind of funny, they spelled it Lenin, and Trotsky are not short of agents in this country. This information quickly made its way to Hoover, who soon had his own agents monitoring LFS. And so when it came down to it, they end up getting rid of them. But I just wanted to read what the movie, because I tried to look for the movie. I wanted to see what the movie The Contrast was. It is owned by TCM, and they don't have it anywhere. You cannot watch it anywhere. So they own the rights to it and they suppress it. So do with, that information, is neat. So after they went after LFS, they actually start getting into like Charlie Chaplin and all that stuff. That's a whole nother story. But The Contrast explored the struggles between coal miners and the mine owners in Mingo County, West Virginia, where laborers were tormented by the company's armed industrial police. The film took its title from the dramatic contrast between the destitute lives of the workers and the opulent lives of the owners. Director Guy Hedlund, the one that informed on it. I don't know why he did that, but used cross-cutting techniques learned from D.W. Griffith to convey the disparity between rich and poor, stirring contempt for the former and sympathy for the latter. One segment flashes from a scene of a young girl digging for food in a trash can to a wealthy estate of an owner where even his dog feasts on a scrumptious chicken dinner. Reviewing this film, a bureau agent warned Hoover of seditious propaganda made to stir up antagonism and hatred between workmen and their employers. Hoover quickly dispatched more agents to investigate the Labor Film Service and other left-wing independents. So Hoover doesn't really get into it again until after World War II, or like right before World War II is when they were, so there was kind of like the FBI wasn't going as hard for after like 1925.
That's such a good review, though. It's such a good review. If I made a movie and the FBI said it was seditious propaganda to stir up like antagonisms between that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I want to hear about. Like something like that's great. Great review.
There is
Good job, guys.
Salt of the Earth is a good one to watch. Like if you want to kind of get that contrast. I think that was more like 1950, but like. Parenti brought that title in, Salt of the Earth. So that's like there's a Salt of the Earth strike or something. Like there's something to do with that in the labor history, and they call it the Salt of the Earth strike, right? And it's about a company town with mines and stuff like that, and it's told like it's a fiction written, but it's. You know what I mean? Like they use some of the town and they use some of the people that live there and stuff like that in the movie. So that's kind of neat. I did bring up Esha's article before on Historically. There's also, this was one of the interviews I actually sat in on, and it was pretty neat. She interviewed Tom Secker and Matthew Alford, who write a lot about this. They're both they're Angloids, but they write a lot about like how the Pentagon was involved in Hollywood and all this stuff, she interviewed him right before the documentary of theirs, Theater of War, came out. So that if you want to watch Theater of War, I think you have to pay to watch it. It came out in 2022. I can't find it free anywhere, and but you can listen to the interview. It's on Historically, so it's Historic LY, and it's called Battlefield Hollywood with Tom Secker and Matthew Alford, and I'll put that all in the notes when I put this up. Do you have anything you want to talk to about on this anymore on this section? The last section is short. What's up?
Yeah, let's just roll with it then.
Okay. Yeah. This one's pretty short. Okay.
38. Room for alternatives? In sum, the news is a product not only of deliberate manipulation, but of the ideological and economic power structure under which journalists operate and into which they are socialized. If we consider censorship to be a danger to our freedom, then we should understand that the media are already censored by those who own or advertise in them, and by the entire corporate-dominated political culture that sets limits on what is permissible opinion. Sometimes, however, the media cannot easily suppress and distort realities about the world because reality itself is radical. The third world really is poor and exploited. The U.S. government really does side with the rich oligarchs and suppresses leftist reform movements at home and abroad. The gap between wealth and poverty really is growing ever greater in most of the world. There really is crime and corruption in high places. The environment really is facing catastrophic dangers caused mostly by massive fossil fuel consumption. Corporations do wield enormous power and do downsize their workforce while reaping record profits. To maintain some connection to the world, the press must occasionally report glimmers of these realities. When it does, the right has complained furiously about a liberal bias. Furthermore, the press is not entirely immune to more democratic and popular pressure. Despite the media's misrepresentation and neglect, if a well-organized and persistent public opinion builds around an issue, it occasionally can break through the media's sound barrier. Is there any alternative to the major media? The Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 did launch the public broadcasting system as an alternative to commercial television. Instead of being independently financed by a sales tax on television sets or some such method, PBS was made dependent on annual appropriations from Congress and was run by a board appointed by the president. PBS and National Public Radio are now required to match federal funds with money from listener contributions and corporate sponsors. Both NPR and PBS offer commentators who are just about as politically safe as any found on the commercial networks. Of the many high-quality documentaries made by independent producers dealing with important political controversies, few are accorded mainstream exposure. Thus, Faces of War, revealing the U.S.-supported counterinsurgency destruction visited upon the people of El Salvador, was denied broadcast rights in 22 major television markets. The award-winning Building Bombs and the expose on the Iran-Contra affair cover-up were denied access to PBS and all commercial channels. Deadly Deception, a documentary critical of General Electric and the environmental devastation wreaked by the nuclear weapons industry, won the Academy Award, yet, with a few local exceptions, was shut out of commercial and public television. So too was the Academy Award-winning documentary Panama Deception, which offered a critical expose of the U.S. invasion of Panama. A powerful and moving expose of the profit-driven American healthcare system is Michael Moore's Sicko, which played in a few movie theaters but never made it to any network. Many areas of the country are awash in talk shows and news commentary that are outspokenly ultra-rightist, pro-corporate, militaristic, anti-union, and anti-feminist. Wealthy conservatives have poured millions of dollars into building the religious right's numerous radio and television outlets, including the Christian Broadcasting Network, which has as many affiliates as ABC. There is a significant religious left in this country, dedicated to peace and social justice issues. But it gets no big financial backing or major media outlets, and therefore is seldom heard by mass audiences. Denied access to mainstream media, the political left has attempted to get its message across through community and listener-sponsored radio stations and small publications that suffer chronic financial difficulties and sometimes undergo harassment from authorities and infiltrators. Skyrocketing postal rates affect a real hardship on dissident publications. At the same time, the government continues to subsidize billions of pieces of junk mail sent out by business and advertising firms. For a while, unlicensed microradio or pirate radio stations began burgeoning across the country. These pirate stations transmit in a limited 1 to 5 mile radius, too small to interfere with larger signals. The real nuisance they pose is their heterodox views. Microstations in a number of locales have been forcibly shut down by the FCC and local police, who break into their premises and haul off their broadcast equipment. There are also legal low-power stations that are required to have a license or waiver from the FCC under penalty of law. A station seeking a LPFM license has to be in areas where there is space on the dial, which rules out most urban areas. Over half the LPFM licenses granted by the FCC have gone to right-wing church groups. The airwaves are the property of the people of the United States and should be open to divergent views. Here are some modest proposals for a more democratic media. The antitrust law that limits the number of media outlets any one corporation can own should be revived. The amount of airtime given to advertising should again be limited. The networks ought to pay for use of the public airways, and these fees should go to financing non-commercial public broadcasting. Public television and radio should be funded by a public tax system rather than by rich corporate underwriters. All broadcast stations should be required to allocate time for free and open debates among a diverse array of political proponents, including the most progressive and revolutionary. There once did exist a fairness doctrine, a law requiring that time be given to an opposing viewpoint after a station broadcasted an editorial opinion. But there was no requirement as to the diversity of the opposing viewpoints, so usually the range was between two only slightly different stances. The FCC ruled that broadcast time should not be made available to communists or the communist viewpoint, but only to persons other than communists. Even this pale and slanted law was too much for the reactionaries. President Reagan vetoed the fairness doctrine in 1987 when Congress attempted to renew it. Ultimately, the only protection against corporate-dominated monopoly media is ownership by the people themselves, with provisions for the inclusion of a broad spectrum of conflicting views. This is not as chimerical or radical as it sounds. In the early 1920s, before it was swallowed up by commercial interests, radio consisted primarily of hundreds of not-for-profit stations run mostly by colleges, labor unions, and community groups. Today, more community-supported radio stations and public-access cable TV stations are needed. The microradio station should be encouraged, for it is among the most democratic of media, requiring almost no capital while being relatively more accessible to the community in which it operates. The internet also offers progressive websites that provide information and opinion, rarely accommodated by mainstream media. By its nature, the internet provides for individual transmission and commentary by just about anyone who has a computer and an opinion, bringing us some of the best and worst, but also providing new opportunities for networking and organizing, and for gathering information. Some giant telephone and cable companies began pressuring Congress to limit the number of internet servers in an effort to establish high-fee monopoly control. Their goal has been to create the electronic equivalent of an expensive fast lane, while relegating all non-paying users to slower, more limited, and less reliable access. Those who own the newspapers and networks will not relinquish their hold over the communication universe. Ordinary citizens will not have access until they can gain control over the resources that could give them access, an achievement that would take a different kind of economic system than the corporate free market we have. In the meantime, Americans should have no illusions about the free and independent press they are said to enjoy.
Okay. All right. Let me just change that back. All right. What was I going to say about this thing? Oh yeah, he brings up the PBS having to do, doing commercials, and I actually remember when that happened. And I remember I was a kid. I might have been like a teenager, or I might have even been younger. And I was like questioning it. I'm like, isn't this supposed to be like corporate free? Like, isn't this supposed to be not sponsored by corporations? And suddenly all the TV show, all the shows on there were like sponsored by this, sponsored by that. And I just thought it was so weird. It was kind of like when I went to my mom when I was like a young teen, and I was like, Mom, why do they play Ma Bell commercials, since that's the only telephone? It's like the only thing we could get. And she's like, well, they have to spend their money somehow. That's how she said it.
Why do they have to advertise as the only one? Yeah. There's so many things like that too. Like, or it's like, you really need more market share, Coca-Cola. Like, really, like what is...
I know.
And it gets like more and more subversive, like the bigger the brand gets.
Yeah.
Like I remember for a while there were like Snickers ads that were just like the font that Snickers uses, right? And the same like marking, and it would just be like hungry ? In the Snickers font, and it's like, it's a Snickers ad, but you shouldn't know it's a Snickers ad.
Yeah.
And it's like really kind of like obnoxious because they like associated an entire like font and color scheme with like a candy bar forever.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. He was critical of the fairness doctrine. I'm so glad that he was critical of it, because everyone, like, libs will go on and on about, like, oh, the fairness doctrine. Well, for one, the fairness doctrine was only put in because of the limitations of broadcasting. The only reason that it would pass, like, the First Amendment challenges that it got when it was first put in was because there's only a limited number of frequencies that you can broadcast on. And so the government has to regulate who can broadcast on the frequencies. Otherwise, it's just going to be like over talk all the time, and you won't be able to pick up anything on the radio.
Yeah.
And so the government licenses you for frequency, and because of that, and because there's a limited number of those, they can't be like, oh, like everybody can't have their own frequency, so you have to give this opposing viewpoint. I didn't know that they specifically excluded the communists. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I only knew that because I think I read this years ago, so so that was the only way I knew that, because I'm sitting there thinking, like, I don't even think that I picked it up. No, because like the one that I was reading wasn't, I don't know how I knew that. I really don't know how I knew that, because if I was reading it in the late 80s, then yeah, maybe he had it in there. I don't know. I just know that I heard that at some point.
If they didn't add that in there, commies would have sued the shit out of all the mainstream media for not bringing them on, right?
I know.
They would just be like, you're not allowing the opposing viewpoint. They'll be like, what do you mean? It's like, well, we oppose both of these views, so we need to have the opposing viewpoint, right? Like, and that's they're like, except for communists, right? Obviously, like,
Jack Jersowich. I know the name. I didn't really know much. It's Democracy for the Few. It's the 9th edition, parentheses. Chill Bill, not Phil. So yeah, I don't know too much about him. I just know his name. I gladly look into him. So there was somebody else I was thinking of, and I can't freaking think of their name. And I know that they passed away right in 2015, right when Bernie announced, or right. Do you know who I'm talking about, Rick? He was another media guy. He was shut out because he was like socialist. He was shut out of mainstream, and it was just kind of sad because everyone would be like, he would have been so happy, like Bernie running, because he was kind of like, he wasn't like a full out communist, you know what I mean? But he was probably on Bernie's level, kind of. And so you bringing up Jack, do you know who Jack Drosowitz is?
I do not.
He's a Marxist, and he did some, he was an American. He did some TV hosting. What was it? I know someone else had brought him up. It was called Brainstorms. It was a public access TV show.
Yeah,
so
the thing is, public access, they had to let everybody on. That was like the thing. There was like cases about them letting like literal Triple K members,
oh yeah,
like have their broadcasts and stuff, and they were like
God.
forced to do it or whatever.
Public access was so fun. Do they even? I mean, they have like the town things. I don't even know if they have public access anymore. Do they? I don't think any of the stations
to, right?
I don't know. I know that they do like town meetings, and they do. I don't know.
I feel like I've seen it when I was in. Last time I it's been so long since I've seen anybody have cable. Like.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't watch cable. I just watch streaming, so I don't know if they still have public access anywhere. I
mean, because everything's public. Everything is public. I mean, we're doing public access TV right now, basically. Lumpy, like.
Yeah.
This is like, if this was being done as a thing. Do you remember the Austin Collins show with the two atheists?
Oh, just barely. I didn't watch a lot of public access. I knew of it. I wasn't really into. I was into going out drinking instead of watching TV.
Secular Talk. I think that's what it was called.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember. I barely remember it.
Like,
what?
I just remember like early YouTube, there was like a ton of like reposts from Secular Talk and all the cranks that used to call into.
Yeah.
So.
No. I actually, now that you're saying that, I even remember seeing some of the clips and stuff like that. Yeah, there was some great. YouTube has some great clips from like public access and stuff. That's so funny.
It was wild where YouTube went to, because like YouTube was started as a dating site.
Was it?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Like, it was video dating. You're supposed to upload your like your personal ad, like the old VHS dating things.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Like, didn't they do that on which channel was it that they did it? They did it on what was the other music channel? There was MTV and then the other one, VH1.
Fuse?
No, was it VH1?
VH1 was one, and there was Fuse, which was the Canadian one.
Oh, okay. So wasn't it VH1 that had like the dating thing at late at night? Like I would be all drunk coming home and I'd watch them because they were so funny.
Well, there was like there was like the ads or whatever that they'd run for like VHS, like locals in your area, and they'll send you like a VHS tape of everybody's like dating profile or whatever.
No, but they would play them like late at night. You could actually just sit there while you were drunk and watch them. You'd watch like all of the people's videos, and they'd have like, you could contact them by like, I don't know if it was like you'd call like a certain number, and then they had like a number or something that you, and they were just like the funniest things. So I don't know.
So wild. I know that was like the original thing, and it just like made, because it was the they just had like one of the, like at the time, all of the streaming video on the internet sucked. Like they had a whole bunch of different sort of like compression formats and stuff, and YouTube accidentally basically came up with the best one.
Yeah.
And so everybody just started posting everything there because it was like the only streaming video that was like guaranteed to work on everybody's computer.
Yeah. The funniest thing is in what year was it? From 1994 to 1996. I worked for Telecommunications Magazine, and, you know, this is when the internet was becoming, you know, more and more relevant, and, you know, like it wasn't really for a couple more years that, like, you know, everyone kind of had a computer and stuff like that. But it's just amazing to me that I missed out like the whole decade of the aughts. I just kind of like didn't go on the internet, didn't I didn't really start doing, like, I didn't get a cell phone till 2013. Like I didn't like use the internet for anything until, I mean, I don't think I was on Facebook, and well, probably 2006 is when I went on Facebook. And that's really probably when I started using the internet, like outside of work. Because I didn't really use, you know, I had my work email, but I didn't really use, I had a personal email. It was at beer.com. It was amstellover@beer.com. I wonder if it's still up.
Yes. I still have a Hotmail address.
Yes,
I'm keeping it forever.
My friend uses her Hotmail.
I still use my Hotmail address, and I'm still going to use it forever because Hotmail, it's just like I've had it for, oh my God.
My father has Juno.
25 years now.
My father uses Juno.
I forgot about that.
And he uses Juno, and they keep like saying like, maybe you should get a different email. My father refuses to get it. He might be the only person using Juno still. I don't know.
Okay, here's the thing about Hotmail addresses is that they won't let you make any new ones. You can't. It's an Outlook.com now. That's like who took over it. And so you can't get a new Hotmail address, but I still have one, and so I'm going to use it for obscure logins from shit from like this. I bet I've also had accounts on forever. I do still actually, man, I haven't been on that in a long time, but I still have one of my oldest accounts is a Slashdot account, and I don't know. Speaking of independent media. Slashdot has always been like the early dig.com or early Reddit news format where it's just like voting stuff up and down. Slashdot invented that. Slashdot.org, I want to say, .net. I can't remember, like, spelt out.
I only remember SBC
just tech news
because I worked in telecommunication. I worked for the magazine, so that's the reason I know SBC. I didn't use SBC Global. I don't know what did that. I don't know what that became. SBC Global was one of the first ones, right? Yeah.
As like a service provider?
Yeah, that had like internet and stuff. I think so. I think it was. If I remember correctly. It was so long ago. I was editor of Latin American news. I didn't keep up on the American companies.
But you were charged a Latin. Do you speak Spanish?
No. Our Latin American news section was like a quarter of a page. That's what I was editor of. It was ridiculous. Yeah. They're like, here, have this. Cause I was assistant to the editor, right? Like that's the job I got. And then they just handed me, you know, it was something he probably had to edit. And then he was just like, oh, this is easy enough. I'll just give it to you. So it was just something that I ended up having to do, I guess. But it was kind of neat because I get, you know, my name in a magazine and that I'm an editor. So I was assistant editor. Sorry.
And now there's none of that anymore. There's just AI and news influencers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, this is where we're at now.
Yep. Well, so yeah, next week we're going to be talking about voting and the political system. Yes, it's such an exciting. There's like 9 sections to it, so I don't know. They're short. They're short sections though. They're not as long as this. They're not like 6 minutes each. You know.
He's way more concise than usual in this book. It's like seems like he's trying to make it textbooky kind of.
Well, that was the purpose. So when he first put this book out, it was 1974. So it was right after it was like a year or two after he totally could not be a professor anymore because they, blacklisted him over Vietnam. And so he wrote the first edition then. And it was like his poli-sci, but he was a poli-sci professor, and this was his poli-sci book, So it was probably something he might have never gotten it out if he was still a professor. And I'm kind of, I don't know. I mean, we were lucky that, we had him and he did so much work, but I feel kind of bad that he, but he probably would have been so much more liberal in the end if he had kept on in the universities,
in the academy, yeah. Because you're not allowed to say the things, right?
Yeah.
You're not allowed to, I hate that, a lot of our critiques align with the right-wing critiques of liberalism.
I know,
it's why they think horseshoe theory is a thing. It's like, just because we have the same criticisms doesn't mean we believe the same things about the world. Maybe it's just something that you actually have wrong with you. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, and our criticism is completely different. We criticize the same thing, but our criticism is coming from a whole different perspective. And we're like, yeah, this is bad because of this, this, and this. Where a right winger's like, this is bad because you're talking mean about us. No, you're talking mean.
But the thing is, we both agree that college turns you into a liberal. Yeah.
Well, I mean, us and right wingers and communists are pretty, we have the same criticisms of liberals. Yes, I see that, but
totally opposite solutions.
Yes,
they would
that's what I'm getting
ban academia, which is wild. And we're getting to that point, and it's interesting to see them being like, we should shut down Harvard. And you're like, wait, what? The eugenics factory, you guys are going to shut it down?
Yeah, Harvard supports, and this is what they don't get, and this is why I keep bringing up all these right wingers. They're the Constitution and my rights and all that, and so I just keep saying, you understand that the people who wrote that were liberals. They believed in liberalism, and that's what you are. That is what you're supporting is liberalism. And, it kind of upsets them a little, but then they just go back to denying that it could possibly be even that Thomas Jefferson was not a liberal. Mm-hmm. Did you see the conversation that's been going on lately about Harriet Tubman?
I saw an offhand post where there was a guy who was like the CIA agents reading on people say online that Harriet Tubman isn't a real person. He's like, we didn't even have money to come up with that one.
It's just,
I don't know. I have no idea what's going on though. I just saw some memeing about it.
Yeah, it's I was seeing a lot of people, I saw the first person, well, at first I thought it was a white woman that said it, but no, she was talking about something else. When I was looking it up, she was like, oh no, that her name was different. She was just bringing up that her name was, our Minta, was it? Or she went by Minta, right? Minty or Mintha.
Oh, her name was
Araminta. Yeah, it was Arab. So that is what they're saying, because they can't find a Harriet Tubman in the records, that Harriet Tubman didn't exist and that the government made her up. because she couldn't possibly have changed her name. Well, first of all, like it's just so funny because like there's no Tubman or whatever. She got married. She changed her name to her husband's name. She used Harriet because it was her mother's name. Like when she got married, she was able to change her name, and she just decided to change it to what she wanted to change her name to. You know, like
right, because like where did she get the other name from? Probably her owner. Yeah, like that's not great.
Yeah, like her probably. Yeah, exactly. So I mean,
like,
I don't know. There's just a wild, like, I'm like, I don't understand how, like, I'm bringing this up because you're talking about, shutting down schools and academia. And we desperately need not the educational system. I understand changing the educational system we have because it's been changed. So it's been watered down so much that you're not getting an education anymore. But to not have enough critical thinking to understand that people change their names all the time is I don't even know how you can get there. I don't even know. And that she was a there's like CIA, and there wasn't even a CIA back then, like that until 1940, like 100 years later. But that she was like an agent of the state because, but I mean, she did act as an agent of the state, but that was a different time. And it was, after, it was during this Civil War, right? Like that she would, you know what I mean? Rick, are you there?
Yeah, no, yeah.
I mean, she was working on like trying to abolish slavery. That's what she was doing. Like, I mean, it was like, I don't have a problem with anything that woman ever did in her life. She did nothing wrong ever. So
the shit that, like, relitigating basic facts is happening more and more and more and more, and I'm losing it. It's making me disassociate with like all society.
I feel the same way. Like it just like I'm just like, at first, and you're like, oh, this has to be a joke. This has to be someone that say no, but it's not coming from just one place. Like there's people. Whether it was started as a joke, I don't know. It was not a funny joke, anyways. You're writing off like this very important. Like I don't believe in the great man thing, but there are people in history like you can't write off. Like you cannot write off Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, well, it's like a symbolism of like it wasn't just her; it was a whole group of people, a whole network of people that she was working with, right? Of enslaved people who were like doing liberatory work, right?
Yeah.
And so like to write out her off is to like write off that entire. And I feel like this is like, I mean, this is kind of the problem, like one of the problems with great man theory is that you can be like, well, if I can't see Harriet Tubman's birth certificate, then it didn't happen. It's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like what, like show me, show me the piece of paper where it says that like it's very silly stuff. It's like, that's not how history works. And we're seeing it more and more with more and more things, and just like people revising stuff that I don't know.
Yeah.
I've seen people try to revise stuff that happened within my lifetime at this point, and I'm like, who's starting to
it's like I lived through that. What are you talking about? Like I was there. Like I saw it. Like, another proletariat classic is saying a major aspect of college is to install a belief that accreditation equal more correct. Yeah, like you can, if you have the money to buy your degrees, or you can get the loans to get your degrees, and a lot of people can't even do that. So if you have the money, then you are correct.
And it like you can see academia kind of changing in this way, because like it used to be that like the rich people would pay to put their kids in the same college as the smart people, and now the smart people aren't allowed to go. You know, like the smart poor people aren't allowed to go anymore. They don't get to do that anymore. And so like the rich people are just there with other rich people's kids, and none of them know anything because they've been like, you know, just like paid through the whole system.
Yeah. Hey, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Lucas, I normally, I will, but I'm going to be ending this in just a couple of minutes. I would let people up. What I do is at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I do a chapter from a Parenti book where we've been on democracy for a few, and we just we listen to part of it and then we discuss part of it. And Rick has been great coming up and talking to me because he is very knowledgeable. Rick just you can just like, I don't know, like I have to prepare to talk about this stuff, and you're just like, oh yeah, do you remember like on that day at this time this happened? And I'm like, why do you have that information in your head?
I don't know, it's just like the way I remember stories, you know. It's like, oh, there's like this base history of the stuff that's going on, you know.
Yep.
Do you know oh no, his name's gonna escape me. He's a lecturer at Austin. He does a lot of stuff about the Middle East. Roy Casagrande. Do you know him?
The name sounds familiar, but I'm probably not that familiar with him.
He does like, I don't know. He's kind of like a grungy looking professor guy who like does like long stuff, mostly about like the history of the Middle East, but he does it just like totally off the cuff. He's just like never like, he's like, no, he's not citing, he's just like telling the story, and like I dig his vibe.
Oh, all right.
Got into, like, Trump.
He's on TikTok, right? Or do people must put his videos up on TikTok? Because I'm looking at a picture of him and I'm like, oh, I know that guy.
At University of Austin.
All right.
And like he's their like history guy or whatever.
Yeah, I've heard him do a bunch of stuff
like,
that
like especially when like he teaches on like the you know Arab expansion and empire and like all the Middle East history stuff.
Yeah, that's what
and some other stuff too, but like mostly that.
Yeah. No, he's interesting.
I don't know. Like that's that, but his like way of like understanding history and stuff. Like I feel like there used to be oral tradition, and that's like how you learn stuff. And you talk to people, and you hear the story, and you try to remember the story, and you got to repeat the story, and like you got to make sure that you don't fuck up the details. And at the beginning, you got to check the details, but after a while, you get it down. And like I don't know. I wish that there was more of that.
Yeah. No. I mean, it definitely
folk tradition stuff.
I feel like the more I do stuff like this, and then I got back into doing the Lit with Lenin, and so we discuss more there. And then, of course, I hang out with the people in Collective, and a lot of times we're not just, a lot of times we can get into, serious conversations and stuff on there. And I feel like that helps me, like being able to have the conversations and listen to people, but have the discussions with them. That helps me retain it better than just listening to someone talk about it, So the conversations always help me. But
there's always like one or two pull facts that I make sure. Like this time, I like going through this. I was like, I got to remember that thing about the Fairness Doctrine, how it excluded communists. Like that's going to come in handy. Discussions about this stuff later, right?
Yeah.
When people are like, oh, but like you have the freedom of speech to say whatever you want. It's like, oh yeah, like except for when we don't, we completely excluded specifically for being communists. It's like, which happens constantly, over and over again, over and over again.
Yeah. No, that I mean,
for being communist.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to have, because you go into you start talking to these liberals and right wingers, and they're, they don't like. I love when they're like, well, what about this? And they have no facts on it. Like They just know what they were told. They know, like, they never read on it. And why are you so concerned with Ukraine if you know nothing about Ukraine? Like, I don't get that.
When the Ukraine war first started, I put up a map of Europe with a bunch of numbers on it, like just like all white map, unlabeled, bunch of numbers on it, and like I was like, which one's Ukraine? And like just went through the chat to see like which numbers people put. It was about 1 in 20 people who could guess Ukraine correctly.
And you got to know that some of those people were looking it up just to. So it's probably a lot less than that.
Yeah, totally.
So,
totally. I didn't even think about that. Like, probably half the people who got it right looked it up.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I do. I do good. I don't do good on landmass if it doesn't show the water around it. Like, I actually have to see like a real map. Like, I have to see where it is, and then I can be like, okay, there's Ukraine. You know what I mean? Like, I at least know that.
I mean,
but I don't know the shapes individually.
I had to look it up.
Yeah.
Like, I had to look it up. I'm like, I know Ukraine is in Eastern Europe. That's like as much as my knowledge of like where it was. I mean, I knew stuff about like Ukraine from like World War II and like early, Soviet stuff, but like I didn't know much about like the modern stuff. And I watched a whole bunch of shit, a whole bunch of different shit about like the history of it, and like I learned about the Luhansk and Donbass independence movement that started in 1992 and not 2014 or 2022, but 1992, the same year that Ukraine became Ukraine. And like, there's like all sorts of.
Yeah, no, I knew like, I'm trying to think, it wasn't really until like, it wasn't 2014. I didn't know when Maidan was going on. I didn't know what was going, like, I didn't pay attention to that. I didn't know. It was definitely a few years later, and it was definitely when like I became and started talking to Esha, and she was becoming a Marxist-Leninist, because that was one of the things she talked about was Ukraine a lot to me prior to all that. So this is like, I'm talking 2017, 2018 is when I kind of found out about that region, and what was going on there. So, but yeah, I mean, you just have to, and that's the thing. And then like when they come into the lives and they think they know exactly what they're like, oh, I'm going to get you with this, with this thing, with this Ukraine thing, and not know anything about it. And then when you're bringing them facts, they're just like, whoa, like what are you doing? No facts, man. Like, and then that's the problem. Like, people need to understand all, communists just keep looking for facts. Like that's how I spend most of my time.
Up here otherwise, right? Because it certainly doesn't come as like a natural position that you just have. Certainly not as an American. It's not like something like, it's not like I didn't know. I bet like one my whole life, and he was kind of weird. Like, to be honest.
Yeah, my uncle was Marxist-Leninist. Yeah. My uncle was. My uncle
like actually.
Oh, you finish.
No, I was gonna say my uncles were in the military. No, but like there was like like one or two people like randos, and that was it. I suppose it's more common now. I guess maybe it's becoming more bandwagony. Which is a good thing. Like, I don't care. People.
Rick, there's no one my age. I cannot find another 54-year-old Marxist-Leninist. I want to talk to a 54-year-old Marxist-Leninist besides myself. 55. I'll take a 55-year-old. I want someone around my age.
Like Trots, maybe.
No, they can't. All right. I want a Marxist.
I've met like, and this is the thing. I've met some boomer Trots before. Like,
no, not the Trots. I get it. Like, I am starting to like. I'll read some of the Trots now. Like a lot of the ones that were like Trots at one point, and then they're like labor. Like they're more like union.
But even then,
kind of
I feel like I've met boomer Trots, but not Gen X Trots.
I don't think there is a Gen X. I think
communist at all.
I am the only Gen X communist. No, there was a guy. I sorry, I do know a couple others, but
no, but like It's pretty rare though. Like it's like because they're like boomer communists because like of the civil rights movement and stuff, right? But like all the Gen X like lefties I know are anarchists, right? Like
Yeah. But that was, I mean,
that was the
all right. So I started digging into all this and the reasons why, and it's something I really want to work out. And I have like tons of information and stuff that I need to write up because it was a combination of the accumulation of the anti-communism that was happening by the time that, you know, our generation started coming into this world, and the fact of us being told as a generation that everything got fixed in the civil rights era, that we didn't have to fight for anything anymore. Like we were being told this, like by the media, by, you know, adults, by, you know,
Captain Planet, man.
yeah, that everything was great. You know, no one saw color anymore. That was a good one. Jesus.
Yeah, you just got to work on recycling and saving the rainforest.
Yes, yes, and women were equal. No, we weren't. Women,
because like, what about Murphy Brown?
oh yes, I felt emboldened. You know, if only Hillary Clinton was president, women would be equal.
But what about Murphy Brown?
I loved watching that show. I don't know why.
Murphy Brown. I used to. I watched it a little bit. It was like a little bit before my time, but like I remember watching it when I was younger. I mean, like what? I think Murphy Brown was like one of the first times I ever saw somebody smoke weed on the TV.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's an episode where she's like gets cancer or whatever.
Yep. Wow, that's so funny. I forgot about that show.
No, it's like, nobody ever talks about that one. They always talk about the Scully effect or whatever. Like they like all these women got into business because of that. But I'm like, what about Murphy Brown though? Because that was like a thing, you know. It was like controversial.
It was a move on from the Mary Tyler Moore, because you had the Mary Tyler Moore and then you went into Murphy Brown. Like Mary Tyler Moore was, you know, she was just a worker. Then Murphy Brown was like, you know, like so much bigger than Mary Tyler Moore was. Second wave.
Feminism, right? Like, and then like,
man.
It's like, it's a different, you know, she's got the shoulder pads.
Oh, yes. Yep. Definitely.
It's lean in time. Right? Like,
yes, I was taught in the 80s if I was just, you know, the B word, I would get ahead too. Like that was another thing I was being taught. Like, just be a B word. Like they loved throwing that around in the 80s. I'm like, I don't want to be. I don't want to be that. Not for a corporation. I don't know.
God damn.
But
the struggle. Also, I think that like the Soviet Union collapsing when you're like, you know, in your teens or early 20s or whatever, like that's
the Winds of Change, the Scorpion song Winds of Change that was written by the CIA. That's
wait, what?
You didn't know that?
Yeah, you wrote a song for
Yes.
like Scorpion songs. Here's the thing about Scorpion songs is like I can't understand a fucking word that guy says in any of his songs. So like I don't know what
because he didn't speak. He didn't know how to speak English. He only sang English, and they wrote the Winds of Change for, you know, the wall coming down, and they had the Scorpions sing it because he was, you know, a German band. And it turned out like, I don't know if it was CIA, but you know, it was written with that in mind, kind of like like.
Yeah, no, the collapse of the the wall comes down. Communism is over. America wins. You know, like I can see where anarchism would be like, okay, like obviously the communism thing didn't work out.
And we also had punk too, and the punk was more reaction. Like you had the early punks had some more like being more communist. And I think
Okay, they were always more anarchist leaning though, like almost.
yeah, that's true.
Like Crass is maybe the most politically radical punk band I can think of, and like they started like an anarchist.
Yeah, they had the commune.
They're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, you're
like,
right.
It's like it's like, you know, like I don't know.
I
I
was
can't think of any like
I had to be an anarchist. It was forced on me.
bands.
It was they invented my reality and made me an anarchist.
No, for real though, it's like this is Chomsky's fault. Like I blame Chomsky.
No.
Like he was the guy. He was like, oh, you're a radical. And then there's like, what is it, like Crime Think, and what's the other one? What's the other like
Black
thing that's
Rose.
like that like
Black Rose was one of the big things, but I don't know. I don't know what you're getting at though. I know Crime Think. I know Chomsky. Who else was
no, but,
around
like
there?
they're like definitely like more anarchist leaning, like all the left publications and stuff, like all the independent media stuff was like there wasn't a lot. I guess it's probably just because like China didn't have a big enough propaganda department. Like nobody else was funding the other side of the media anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like the Soviets are gone. China's not really doing it. There's no like, and so like all you're left with is trots, right? Which makes sense because like,
You know,
Yeah,
do you remember the
like,
shows like Face the Nation or like the things they had like well, you wouldn't know, it was the 80s, but you might have seen some. I was just picturing like Parenti writing this whole thing, and there's this. I have just the picture of his face from it. He's like on. It wasn't Face the Nation, but it was one of those things. It was like Point Counterpoint or like one of those shows, and so they would have like the the Democrat and then the Republican, and then they would have like some other person, and this happened to be Michael Parenti in it, and it just he's just sitting in the middle of them, and the look on his face is just like these people are just like so ignorant. He's just like, why am I here? It's just so funny.
He like looks like the guy with his arms crossed in the corner of the party meme.
Yeah.
You know, like he's like, they don't even know I actually understand geopolitics because I'm a fucking professor of it, right? Like, no, the one clip from one like those shows in the 80s I always remember is the one where Frank Zappa, where he goes off about how the U.S. is turning into a democracy because they're going off about the fucking parents group with Tipper Gore.
Yep.
Like,
that's how I found out about Frank. I didn't know who Frank Zappa was before that. Even like I was in
Zappa's
like
awesome.
Yeah, that's where I found Zappa. So that was probably like 85 maybe. 84, 85 when that was happening. You had like Dee Snider and
something like that.
Yeah, it might have been a year or two later.
And they were like, well, the thing is, they were going after Zappa because he had an album called Jazz from Hell.
Yeah.
And it was an instrumental album. And they wanted to like ban him for like obscenity. And he's like, it's saxophones, guys. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, they wanted to put a parental advisory sticker on it.
Yes. Because
when his solution to the problem made the most sense, he was like, what if we just make them print an insert that has all the lyrics on it so the parents can read the lyrics before they buy the record for their kids? And they didn't want to do that because of like the copyright issues, basically. It's because so like they'd have to pay. If you like print it, it's like you got to pay a separate fee to the writer of the whatever if it's not the person that's that. It was like it was an industry issue they could have fixed easily, but then instead they put the fucking parental label. And now anybody can watch anything or listen to anything that they want to ever, basically.
Yeah,
if they really want to.
Yeah.
None of that shit matters.
It didn't matter back then either. It was like half the time kids don't even know what the lyrics are. They're not even listening to them. But
totally. Yeah. No, it's like
half the time, the lyrics I thought they were totally not the lyrics I thought they were. Now that I'm older and there is the internet and you can look up the lyrics, you're like, oh, wow, he wasn't saying that the whole time. But, yeah. I don't know, Rick. All right, I gotta get going. I gotta take my medicine and chill out.
All right. It's easy.
So next week is voters' parties and stolen elections. Should be a fun one.
Oh, dang. You gotta be careful not to get banned because they really don't like it when you talk about stolen elections on TikTok. So you gotta be.
Well, these are the older stolen elections, so they'll probably be fine with it. This is, of course, he's talking about Bush.
I got banned once for talking about the shit that happened with Gore in Florida.
Oh,
It happened
no.
to me once.
All right.
Like,
We'll see what
so
happens.
You gotta be careful.
I mean, I totally get kicked off the For You page constantly, so what am I going to do? I'm just using this as a vehicle to put it up on YouTube. I don't
Censorship
care.
of the media, the billionaires trying to hide the truth from us.
The whole point of this whole episode. No. All right, everyone. Have a good one.